one demand from our government: seal a deal now.
Direct talks between the U.S. and Hamas are reportedly focusing on the release of an American-Israeli citizen held in Gaza. In Tel Aviv, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
Obviously, one of the many stories we are continuing to follow right here on Fox 5. And joining us to discuss all things politics for the first time in studio, Mr. Armen Kurdian, U.S. Navy captain, retired, and political strategist right here on the LZ. Good to see you, sir.
You too, Guy. This is a real treat. It's great to see you in person.
I got to tell you, it's always interesting to see you on the other side of the screen. In this case, you're live in studio in real life.
I know. It was a perfect happenstance, and I says, hey, let's see if Guy's can fit me into his busy schedule.
Well, anytime you're in D.C., you're welcome here, sir.
Great, thank you.
We got a lot to get to. We're going to start with the big story of the day, and that is the White House now withdrawing the CDC director nominee, Mr. Dave Weldon, just before the confirmation hearing. We heard this just a little while ago. Apparently, he made some controversial comments, if you will, which the White House found concerning. Your take on this, sir?
Well, RFK Jr. also had made perhaps some comments that were concerning or were maybe not along the mainstream or line that caused some Republicans consternation. However, as a presidential candidate, he backed off and then gave his full support to Donald Trump. So I think some Republicans ultimately saw this as a thank you to RFK Jr., saying just make sure you keep your rhetoric to certain lines. I don't think Dave Weldon has that kind of credibility, and the Republicans always put themselves on the line already, and I don't see them as having to want to do it again and to have somebody that's perhaps interests may not exactly align, but I think they want to get a little bit of bipartisan support for this one.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, yet again, we know that with many of Trump's nominees, there were a lot of questions swirling around them, if you will, but yet this is the one that they said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and pull it back.
Yeah. I think every now and then you give a name and you ultimately say, this one's just, it's not going to work. I mean, they pulled it back with Matt Gaetz, and they pulled this guy back. Generally speaking, a president is allowed to have the people that he wants to work for him. He is the chief executive. He gets to pick those folks. But they still have to be, a lot of them still have to be confirmed by the Senate. And I think this was just not a fight the White House saw that was worth fighting.
Yeah, by the way, during the White House press conference the other day, the White House press secretary touted that the president's nominees happened to be some of the nominees that were, in essence, confirmed the fastest in U.S. history. Very interesting.
Yes.
We're going to move on to yet one of the other big stories that happens to be taking place, and that is, you hear that? I'm talking about that clock ticking, the countdown to a potential government shutdown. In this case, we know that it's very interesting. Obviously, no one wants a government shutdown because it will affect federal employees. However, the D.C. region is very different right now. We know that as it currently stands, if the, let's say, continuing resolution passes through the Senate, D.C. will lose out on some $1 billion in funding. That's a big issue for Democrats, and not only that, but a big issue for folks right here in the nation's capital. We also know that Republicans are going to need at least 7 Democrats from across the aisle to vote for this in order to become, or let's say, come into fruition. Your take on all of this?
Well, there's several things to unpack here. First of all, with regards to a continuing resolution, basically funds the government at previous levels of the last year. Whatever was last year, they're just going to extend it all into fiscal year 2024. It's not ideal for government. It's not ideal for defense. It's not ideal for departments. It's not ideal for the district. Now, when it comes to the $1 billion that the D.C. area is not going to get, the council, the city government, or D.C. government basically decided, they made a conscious decision, we're going to spend to expected 2025 levels. So, in a way, maybe you can say, hey, we were betting on the come, and that bet's not coming through to fruition. And they say, well, but this is how it's always been done. We've always gotten this funding through the continuing resolutions. And you're kind of playing with fire when you actually do that, rightly or wrongly, because that's how the money actually comes in. Now, having said that, let's walk that dog a little bit. Let's say that Republicans, in an effort to try to get the Democrats to come on board, to get 7 Democrats to say, all right, we'll throw in that $1 billion for D.C. spending. I've got a gut feeling that that would not be enough to get some D.C. or get some Democrats to vote for that continuing resolution. And if that's the case, and now the Republicans could have perhaps this is a long game political argument to say, look, we're passing this budget and we're giving D.C. what they want, and Democrats still are voting to shut it down. So in the past, we've always seen, regardless of the circumstances, Republicans tend to get blamed. No matter whether the majority or minority, they get blamed for the shutdown. This case might be a little bit different because Donald Trump does still have a lot of political capital. He still has a lot of support out there amongst the rank and file American citizen. And I don't know if the Democrats' intransigence on this continuing resolution, which cuts $13 billion out of the budget.
Sure.
Most of those were earmarks that were just stuck in by Congressmen to sort of bring home the bacon, and takes those out. Democrats are calling them cuts. It's just calling, hey, we're just taking out the earmarks because that's really not the best way to do business. So I think this time might be a little bit different. I think Democrats are going to be under a lot more pressure to support this CR.
Yeah, according to President Trump, who spoke from the White House yesterday, he's stating that Democrats really need to get their act together, as he puts it. I want to stay very quickly on the federal employees, if you will. We have had several folks that we know that actually voted for Mr. Trump. Several months later, they're now out of a job. We know that, yet again, if a government shutdown does happen, folks are going to be out of a job, at least temporarily, until they can go back. What would you say to that person as a political strategist, that those that in essence feel somewhat betrayed because they cast a vote for Trump, but yet again, while under his administration, they've lost their jobs?
When you lose your livelihood, it's never good, whether you're working for a private company or the federal government. There has been this mentality or this doctrine, basically, that if you work for the federal government, you have very good job security. In terms of advancement, in terms of your financial security, you really have to mess up really badly in order to actually get fired. So it is tragic, and it is awful, and it's terrible if they lose their jobs. Having said that, when you look at the size of government 40 years ago to where it is now, it is several times larger. We've only passed 40 years, like say when we were under Reagan and when we are now. The one interesting thing which I looked up is that the size of the federal government in terms of civilian workforce, not including military or Coast Guard uniform, is actually not that much different than it was. But what has changed is the number of contractors, a number of support. So this is why the government is so much bigger. We have all these contracts going out for some more support. Hey, we need more people to do this. We need more people to do that. And I get it. You lose your job, it's a bad thing. But at the same time, you also have to look at it from the standpoint that the federal government has a $1.9 trillion deficit. Guy, if you balance the budget today, if you balance the budget for fiscal year 2025, we would still end up paying more interest in 2026 than we do in this year because the debt's being refinanced at a higher rate. So it's really sad that some people may lose their jobs, but at the same time, the fiscal stability of this country is at stake. For me personally, our national debt is an existential threat to our security, to our ability to influence efforts and issues around the world, and also back here at home. We have got to bring this debt under control. We have got to start paying it down because we are in a really, really bad situation. And 1.9 trillion is like this massive ball and chain on our economy. So that's got to change.
We got about 2 minutes left, and I really want to make sure I address this, and that happens to be this word known as tariffs. I have to tell you, a lot of folks probably up until this point said, dear God, what the heck does that happen to be? Well, we all now know. In this case, I'm making reference to the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, and then on the other side, in this case, particularly Canada, they also imposing tariffs. It's a ball that continues to go back and forth. Where will this end, and when will it end?
With regards to tariffs, I think the tariffs against Mexico are justified because they were basically putting people on trains and sending them up north to cross the border illegally. Tariffs against China, even Trump is not hard enough on China from my standpoint, from that standpoint. When it comes to Canada and the tariffs imposed on Canada, you'll get a lot of Republicans just saying, well, I'm giving him a little bit of rope here to go, but I'm not sure I understand what the end game is. I really don't understand what the end game is. I think Canada is a much more rational partner, our largest trading partner. I don't know that the tariffs with the Canadians is really going to be very helpful. In the end, he may get what he wants, but he's going to really damage the relationship, at least so long as he's in office. So I would hope this doesn't go on much further. Hopefully things will get ironed out at the G7.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll see that very soon, and soon enough we shall find out. Yet again, Mr. Armen Kurdian, political strategist, joining us right here on the Live Zone. Oh, by the way, U.S. Navy captain retired. Got to make sure we say that as well. Appreciate your service, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks so much for coming in studio. Got to have you back.
Absolutely.
Absolutely love it. Hey, guys, we're talking about potential changes within the Department of Education. That, and oh, by the way, Councilman Robert White. Yeah, yet again, that $1 billion deficit that D.C. may face. He'll join us to discuss that within the next 10 minutes. You're watching The Live Zone. We'll be right back.